China had a very sinister plan in motion to kill every single business in the USA, but it was spoiled last night. You see, over the last few weeks, while the CCP was negotiating a trade deal with the USA, they were secretly blackmailing other countries to stop exporting goods to the United States. We only know this because one of these countries actually shared the blackmail letters with the Trump administration. Now, according to this letter, China wanted to kill every American business, and they wanted to do this on November 1st, 2025. The terrifying question is, why China thinks they can even attempt something like this? Well, the answer lies in their insane monopoly on a critical sector that was once ruled by the US. You see, defense systems, semiconductor production, automotive manufacturing, and healthcare all can't function without rare earth elements. And surprisingly, despite the name, these elements aren't actually all that rare, but they can't be used directly. There's a secret to unlocking their power that China has cracked. You see, rare earth elements are a class of 17 metallic elements scattered across the Earth's crust. And unlike their name, they are more abundant than many other metals like gold, platinum, or even copper. In fact, unlike oil or natural gas, which require complex seismic studies and costly exploration to locate, rare earth deposits can often be identified more easily because they occur in a variety of rock types, soils, and sands. And what makes them different are their unique properties. You see, rare earth elements enable stronger magnetism, unique light-emitting properties, and high-temperature stability compared to common metals like iron, copper, or aluminum. They play a crucial role in modern technologies. Their applications, from powerful magnets in electric vehicles and wind turbines to phosphors in screens and catalysts in industrial processes, make them extremely difficult to replace. This is why rare earth elements are everywhere, in wind turbines, smartphones, microwaves, wireless networks, submarines, fighter jets, and even cars. But what makes China a superpower is the biggest application of REEs. You see, the biggest use of REEs is making powerful heat-resistant magnets, the kind essential for electric motors. These magnets can withstand extreme heat and constant vibration, which makes them perfect for vehicles. Even gas-powered cars need rare earths for pollution filters, exhaust sensors, electric motors, and even speakers. Hybrids need even more, and electric vehicles? They need the most. And you might have guessed who leads the electric vehicle mafia. That's right, it's China. With the sale of 4.27 million electric vehicles, Chinese automaker BYD has officially overtaken Tesla, becoming the world's largest EV producer, breaking Tesla's years-long dominance in the industry. And it's not just BYD. Geely, NIO, XPeng, SAIC Motors, and Great Wall Motors are now serious global contenders, giving tough competition to American, Japanese, and European brands. Why? Because they offer better performance, efficiency, and lower prices, and the hidden advantage, rare earth elements. As of 2024, more than 60% of all electric vehicles sold worldwide are made in China, and REEs are the game changer behind this dominance. But not as much as you might think. The average EV uses about 1.5 kilograms of rare earth magnets per vehicle, which works out to roughly 7.5 grams per kilowatt of power. Some electric vehicles even use more, up to 4 kilograms of rare earth magnets, or as much as 15 grams per kilowatt. So, on an estimate, a single car might only use 4 pounds of rare earths, worth about $50 to $200. But the problem isn't the quantity per car. The problem is, without rare earths, you simply can't make the car at all. This is where China wins the game of dominance. Even though REEs aren't rare, the reason other countries failed and China won is a simple recipe. REEs are abundant, but producing them from their deposits is not easy. Also, the process of separating and refining them is extremely complex. It requires highly specialized technology, expensive equipment, and toxic chemical processing, a combination that most countries abandon because of high costs and serious environmental risks. And that's exactly where China stepped in and took over. As always, China ignored environmental concerns, and it used its decades-old ability to scale production to massive levels. Today, this monopoly has reached insane levels. As of 2025, China controls more than 90% of the world's rare earth processing capacity, 69% of the world's rare earth ore production, 85% of the world's purified light REEs, and a staggering 100% of heavy REE refining. This means China doesn't just dominate the rare earth industry, It owns the entire value chain, from mine to motor. This gives it unmatched power over the global supply chain. China doesn't just sell these resources, it controls the levers that can stop entire industries overnight. And if you think more people need to understand that kind of power, well, hit like and subscribe. It helps push stories like this beyond the algorithm and past the silence. But before China took over, it was the United States that dominated the rare earth market for much of the second half of the 20th century. Sounds surprising, right? It all began in 1949, when explorers discovered rich deposits in Mountain Pass, California. By the 1960s, the mine became the world's top source for rare earths, especially europium, which made color televisions possible. These rare earths also powered early medical scanners, lasers, fluorescent lights, and microchips, making Mountain Pass a strategic asset for the US defense and tech industries. But while America mined, China observed. As early as the 1960s, Chinese executives visited Mountain Pass, quietly studying US mining technology. Then, with cheap electricity and loose environmental laws, China began building its own rare earth infrastructure, not just mines, but refineries and research labs. At first, the industry in China was chaotic. Hundreds of small, unregulated firms undercutting each other. But behind the scenes, Beijing had a strategy. By the 1980s, China was already outpacing the US in rare earth patents and research. In 1983, it filed its first REE patent, and in just 14 years, it surpassed the US, which had been working on them since the 1950s. From 1985 to 1995, China's rare earth mining production surged, from just 8.5 thousand metric tons to roughly 48,000 metric tons, while its share of global mining output grew from 21.4% to 60.1%. Meanwhile, in the US, things started falling apart. In 1980, rare earths were mistakenly classified under the same regulations as thorium, a mildly radioactive element. That decision led to a regulatory nightmare. This meant mining and processing them suddenly became way more expensive, tons of paperwork and full of red tape, and too much trouble for many companies to bother. And if this wasn't enough, another disaster struck. The disaster for Mountain Pass. In 1997, after multiple radioactive waste spills contaminated the Mojave National Preserve, the mine's owner, Molycorp, faced legal action and shut down its processing plant just a year later in 1998. China saw this as a huge opportunity and made big moves. China ramped up production at Bayan Obo, a rare earth mine in Inner Mongolia that holds an estimated 40% of the world's known reserves. They flooded the global market with cheap rare earths, driving Western competitors, including Molycorp, completely out of business. Even German and Japanese refineries shut down their US plants and moved to China. But China wasn't just winning on price. It was acquiring technology, too. One of the biggest game changers was the Magnequench deal. Magnequench was a division of General Motors, created to manufacture neodymium magnets, the strongest permanent magnets in the world that are essential for electric motors. But in a stunning move, Magnequench was sold in 1988 to a group linked to former Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping's family. By 2000, the entire US facility was shut down and moved to China. Sounds like a victory for China, right? This dominance had an unseen, ugly side. China's rare earth monopoly didn't just attract global manufacturers, it also came at a massive human and environmental cost. With unregulated mining, toxic waste, and widespread air and water pollution, rare earth production turned into a public health disaster. By the year 2000, China had 247 cancer villages, especially in mining regions. The cost of rare earth dominance was being paid in human lives. In response, Beijing started shifting gears. China began imposing production and export quotas, not just to reduce pollution, but also to tighten control over global supply and push for higher value processing within the country. These quotas created a kind of two-tier pricing system. Rare earths sold within China were cheaper, while exports to the rest of the world became limited and expensive. But there was another unexpected consequence. The quotas sparked a booming smuggling industry. By the mid-2000s, analysts estimated that up to 30% of China's rare earth exports were illegal, smuggled out to meet soaring demand from Japan and the US. In fact, a 2012 Chinese media investigation compared the rare earth industry to drug trafficking, saying there are generally two types of people who can deal with rare earths. Someone who has just been released from prison, and someone who can get someone out of prison. Those who are not afraid of death, and high-level officials. They're all involved. Realizing the loopholes, China changed its strategy. Instead of controlling export volumes, China began deciding which companies could operate at all, tightening controls from inside the industry itself. Chinese authorities launched a campaign called 1+5. an ambitious and often ruthless plan to shrink the entire rare earth industry down to just 6 giant companies. Officials even referred to it as their secret war against illegal production. Starting in 2011, provincial authorities carried out surprise audits of mines, seizing illegal ore and byproducts, and, when necessary, blowing up and destroying illegal mining operations. Within just 4 years, China declared victory. Dozens of small mining and refining companies were shut down, and these surviving firms were merged into 6 massive, mostly state-owned corporations called the Big Six. Through the Big Six, Beijing could now control both the supply and the price of rare earths, cementing China's unmatched dominance in the global market. And the strategy worked perfectly. Companies around the world had no choice but to follow the supply, moving their manufacturing and partnerships to China just to survive. That is why Tesla didn't just go to China for cheap labor. It built its massive gigafactory in Shanghai, opened in 2020, because it needed unlimited access to neodymium and dysprosium, 2 critical rare earths used in EV motors. Tesla has since signed long-term supply contracts with Chinese firms, not just for magnets, but also for lithium, and they are not alone. Apple, GM, Volkswagen, Siemens, Hitachi, all have either moved manufacturing, formed partnerships, or kept critical supply lines in China because reliable access to rare earths is non-negotiable. This strategy also played out in Japan. China first became Japan's top supplier of purified REEs. Then, by restricting supply, it pushed Japanese magnet makers to shift production into China, giving Beijing access to the final pieces of advanced magnet technology in the early 2010s. Today, China rarely exports raw materials. Instead, it adds value by turning those resources into finished products. Magnets, electric motors, batteries, full electric vehicles. By 2019, China was producing 92% of the world's rare earth permanent magnets. And now it's becoming a serious player in electric vehicle manufacturing, entering and expanding in the European market. Now just think about it. If one country holds full control, from raw material to refined product, over a group of minerals essential to every modern technology, how dangerously could they use that power? In fact, China proved it. In 2010, a Chinese fishing boat collided with 2 Japanese Coast Guard vessels. When Japan arrested the captain, Beijing struck back. China cut off all rare earth exports to Japan not for days or weeks, but for 2 full months. At the same time, Beijing slashed its global REE export quotas by nearly 40%. The results were shocking. Rare earth prices skyrocketed, factories scrambled, supply chains froze, and panic spread worldwide. The dysprosium oxide price surged from $91 per kilogram in January of 2009 to $2,377 per kilogram in August of 2011. This remains the most severe disruption ever recorded in the rare earth market. For the first time, the US, Japan, and the European Union were forced to confront a harsh reality. China could weaponize rare earths anytime it wanted. China's dominance over rare earths wasn't just an industrial edge, it was a geopolitical weapon. That crisis in 2010 pushed the US, the EU, and Japan to take action. They filed a case against China at the World Trade Organization, and eventually they forced Beijing to drop its export quotas on rare earths. But that was more than a decade ago. And since then, global geopolitics has only become more chaotic. China today is not the same China it was in 2010. Beijing is no longer interested in listening to international organizations. Trade rules, WTO verdicts, diplomatic pressure, China simply doesn't care. China's ongoing trade tensions with other countries have only made the problem worse. Since 2023, Beijing has tightened restrictions on critical mineral exports, materials essential for chip-making, defense systems, and high-tech products. It even banned the export of rare earth refining equipment, technology, and intellectual property. The truth is, many countries don't even have the technical know-how to do this on their own. This isn't just about economics. There's a growing fear that rare earth exports could indirectly strengthen other nations' militaries. It's all part of China's slow, calculated buildup of leverage. The supply of rare earths isn't truly limited, but China is making sure it keeps full control of what it has. Then, on the 4th of April, 2025, Beijing announced full export restrictions. Within just 3 weeks, rare earth prices jumped 40 to 65%. The auto industry was hit the hardest. Vehicle plants in Europe shut down. Ford even stopped making the Explorer at its Chicago factory. Because here's the reality. You can't manufacture a modern car without rare earths. They're in every motor, every battery, every sensor. By June of 2025, Beijing finally signaled it might ease restrictions. Reports said the Chinese government began granting licenses to certain suppliers. President Trump quickly claimed the shortage was over, but experts warned this was only a temporary patch. The export licenses expire in just 6 months. and no one knows whether the solution will hold beyond that. The restrictions have already created a massive supply bottleneck. Experts say it will take months for the flow of magnets to resume, because thousands of license applications are still waiting for approval. The volatility in the US-China relations, tariffs, trade wars, mineral restrictions, they keep getting worse. And it's not like the rest of the world hasn't noticed China's dominance. Several countries have tried to find solutions, but with limited success. A few decades ago, France was a major player in rare earth separation, thanks to Rhône-Poulenc, which is now Solvay. But in 1982, economic pressures and strict regulations forced its La Rochelle plant to restrict operations to only a few specialized uses. Good news is that at the end of May 2022, Solvay announced plans to restart its rare earth separation and purification activities for magnets. But the real challenge is that China can manipulate global prices at will. It can flood the market with cheap rare earths or create artificial scarcity, making it nearly impossible for new projects to survive economically. That's why private investors hesitate to put money into new plants. America imports around 80% of its rare earth elements from China. Although it has been falling gradually, it still remains a significant number. This is a huge concern for the United States, not just because the US auto and AI industries depend on rare earths, but because the entire US defense sector cannot function without them. Rare earths are indispensable in modern defense equipment, from F-35 fighter jets and Virginia-class submarines, to Tomahawk missiles, radar systems, Predator drones, and smart bombs. Just one F-35 fighter jet contains over 900 pounds of rare earths. An Arleigh Burke-class destroyer needs about 5,200 pounds, and a Virginia-class submarine uses nearly 9,200 pounds. But the problem is that the US is already lagging behind in manufacturing these defense technologies, while China is rapidly expanding munitions production, acquiring advanced weapon systems 5 to 6 times faster than the US. Surprisingly, this was mentioned not by some Chinese official, but by a former US Air Force official. And the most concerning fact is that China is preparing with a wartime mindset. Even before the latest export bans, the US defense industry struggled with limited capacity and lacked the ability to scale up production to meet demand. So further restrictions on rare earths will only widen the gap, strengthening China's military capabilities far faster than the United States can keep up. Historically, the US maintained stockpiles of critical minerals for about 4 to 5 years to prevent other nations from weaponizing them. But stockpiles alone won't be enough, especially as the global tech and electric vehicle market grows at a faster pace. And as of today, there is still no heavy rare earth separation happening in the United States. But it doesn't mean it won't happen in the future, because the plans are ready, and the US is ready to counter China. In its 2024 National Defense Industrial Strategy, the Department of Defense set a goal to build a complete mine-to-magnet REE supply chain by 2027, one that could fully meet US defense needs without relying on China. Since 2020, the Department of Defense has committed more than $439 million to building domestic supply chains. The Pentagon awarded MP Materials $9.6 million in 2020 to build a light rare earth separation facility at Mountain Pass, California. And in 2022, an additional $35 million for a heavy rare earth processing plant. These will be the first facilities of their kind in the US, integrating everything from mining to separation, refining, and magnet production. But even at full capacity, MP Materials will only produce 1,000 tons of NdFeB, or neodymium magnets, by 2025, less than 1% of the 138,000 tons China produced back in 2018. The Pentagon has also backed Lyna's rare earth US subsidiary with major grants. $30.4 million in 2021 for a light REE separation facility, and $120 million in 2022 for a heavy REE processing plant. These are important steps, but the US is still far from achieving a fully independent mine-to-magnet supply chain. Even recent breakthroughs, like USA Rare Earths producing its first dysprosium oxide sample in 2025, are at lab scale, not full-scale production. In the future, breaking China's monopoly will only get harder, because Beijing is aggressively trying to control nearly every tapped and untapped rare earth reserve across the globe. And it already has the largest reserves of rare earth elements on the planet. Massive deposits in Inner Mongolia and southern China hold about 44 million metric tons of rare earths, nearly 48% of the world's total reserves. But China doesn't just rely on its own reserves. Shenghe Resources, a partially state-owned Chinese rare earth company, holds around 90% ownership of the Vietnam Rare Earth Company, and has major stakes in projects across Australia, Tanzania, Vietnam, and Canada. Then there's China's Rare Earth Group, CREG, a megafirm created by merging China Minmetals, Chinalco Rare Earth, and China Southern Rare Earth between 2021 and 2024. CREG alone controls more than 50% of China's heavy rare earth output, making it a central player in global supply. Other state-owned giants like China Minmetals and China Non-Ferrous Metal Mining Group, CNMC, are also snapping up overseas mineral assets, not just rare earths, but copper, nickel, cobalt, and more. So it's all part of China's long-term strategy to dominate global resources from raw ore to refined high-tech materials. And if you want to understand just how powerful rare earths have become in global geopolitics, Myanmar is a great example. Northern Myanmar's Kachin state is rich in heavy rare earth elements like dysprosium and terbium, minerals that are essential for EV motors, high-tech magnets, defense systems, and aerospace. Since the 2021 military coup, this region has seen a massive surge in illegal, unregulated mining. The money from rare earths fuel both sides of the conflict: the Kachin Independence Army, the KIA, and the military-aligned Border Guard Force. In October of 2024, the Kachin Independence Army seized Chipwi and Panghua, two towns sitting on some of the world's richest heavy rare earth deposits. These materials, dysprosium and terbium, are vital for EVs, wind turbines, and advanced defense tech. So China saw an opportunity. It reacted fast. It shut border gates along the Yunnan corridor, halting all rare earth shipments from Myanmar. Then came the ultimatum: stop the offensive or face a rare earth purchase ban. Talks dragged on for months. Finally, in December of 2024, a secret meeting in Kunming changed the game. The KIA introduced a 20% tax on exported concentrates. Chinese buyers pushed back, but by April of 2025, both sides settled on a fixed price of 35,000 yuan per ton. Trade resumed, but now under KIA regulation. A rebel army had just become the de facto governor of a critical supply corridor. Since Myanmar's 2021 coup, rare earth mining in Kachin has exploded. Active sites jumped from 130 in 2020 to over 370 of them by 2024. Chipwi alone has more than 2,500 toxic leaching pits. And the boom is massive. Between 2017 and 2024, Myanmar exported over 290,000 tons of rare earths to China, worth more than $4.2 billion. 85% of that came after the coup. Today, Myanmar supplies over 60% of China's heavy rare earth imports. The money from these exports is fueling Myanmar's civil war, funding militias, weapons, and endless conflict. But for China, this is not new. Chinese companies have decades of experience working with militias and rebel groups in Africa. They don't really care if their money is burning villages or prolonging wars, as long as the rare earths keep flowing across the border. And, just like Myanmar, there's another country with vast, untapped reserves of rare earth elements: Greenland, which China tried to exploit, but hasn't succeeded in doing yet. Greenland is incredibly rich in rare earths and critical minerals, and has now become a major geopolitical hotspot. According to a report, Greenland holds around 1.5 million metric tons of rare earth reserves, concentrated in projects like Tanbreez and Kvanefjeld. Since 2013, China has ramped up cooperation with Greenland in natural resources. The first clear sign came in 2014, when Greenland Minerals Energy, GME, signed a Memorandum of Understanding with China's Non-Ferrous Metal Industries Foreign Engineering and Construction Company, or NFC. The goal was to build a fully integrated global rare earth supply chain. China's Shanghe Resources later bought 9% of GME shares. A strategic move, because the Kvanefjeld site alone holds around 270,000 tons of uranium along with rare earths. By 2018, Shanghe secured a deal to lead the processing and marketing of materials extracted from Kvanefjeld. It even partnered with China National Nuclear Corporation to improve rare earth separation from uranium and thorium deposits. Meanwhile, even America got lucky. It managed to secure the Tanbreez rare earth mine, a project valued at about $3 billion, backed by the US Export-Import Bank and led by Australian geologist Greg Barnes. This single win gives the US a rare foothold in the race for critical minerals, but Beijing is still far ahead. But tapping Greenland's reserves is far more difficult than in most other countries. The harsh, icy terrain and the region's extreme sensitivity to environmental concerns makes mining incredibly complex. That is why, in 2021, Greenland passed a law limiting the amount of uranium allowed in mined resources. This single action froze the development of a major rare earth mine in southern Greenland, showing just how fragile and uncertain rare earth projects can be here. China continues to invest in Greenland for one clear reason: to ensure the US or any other country fails to tap into these rare earth reserves. It's a classic monopolistic strategy, a rigid superpower trying to own every single mine so that the rest of the world has no choice but to depend on it. This control over REE reserves makes it extremely difficult for other nations or companies to compete. Take India, for example. It has around 7.23 million tons of rare earth reserves. But without a large, advanced refining industry, Indian companies still rely heavily on China or on recycled materials. Yes, you heard that right. To break China's monopoly, countries like India and Japan are recycling electronic wastes to extract rare earths and reuse them in new products. In 2023 to 2024, India alone generated 3.8 million metric tons of e-waste, making it the third largest producer in the world after China and the US. In September of 2024, the US Department of Defense also invested $4.2 million in rare earth salts, a startup extracting rare earth oxides from recycled products like fluorescent light bulbs. But recycling is expensive, energy intensive, and can be highly polluting. Many countries don't even have the proper refineries or safe recycling systems to make it viable. So investing in building self-reliant industries is the best and most efficient way to break China's monopoly. Australia, Vietnam, and Saudi Arabia are already emerging as key players in this effort. Australia is especially important. It has vast rare earth deposits and is now building its own separation and refining capabilities. Its Browns Range project could become the first major producer of dysprosium outside of China, with an estimated 2,294 tons of reserves. Once operational, it could produce around 279,000 kilograms of dysprosium every year, and dysprosium is used in making high-performance, heat-resistant magnets. However, until the refinery is fully built, Australian companies will remain dependent on Chinese refining until at least 2026. Saudi Arabia, on the other hand, holds significant heavy rare earth deposits, the kind that are much rarer and crucial for defense and high-tech industries. But to compete with China, governments and big companies must step in. No private firm will take on this risk alone, because China can flood the global market with cheap REE products the moment anyone tries to compete. And another path is to rely less on rare earths altogether, by developing and adopting the best possible alternatives. For example, Tesla has cut rare earths in its EV motors by 25%. Toyota has developed magnet motors with less rare earth content. Supplier ZF has created entirely magnet-free motors. And new tech is emerging fast. Minnesota-based Neuron Magnetics is building magnets that use zero rare earths. Its investors include GM, Stellantis, and Volvo. In fact, demand for this technology skyrocketed after China's export controls. Neuron's magnets are made from iron and nitrogen, minerals that are available in abundance. They're already building a plant in Minnesota, set to open between 2026 and 2027, with a second 10,000-ton facility planned for 2029. That one factory alone could supply magnets for millions of EVs in North America. But until America or other countries build self-sufficient rare earth industries or flood the market with viable alternatives, China continues to sit at the center of the global REE supply chain. Now, whether China will continue to dominate rare earths or the rest of the world will find a way around it is something only time will tell.